to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from pristineauction.com studios with your hosts, Jake Ciely, Chris Meaney, and Joe Holka.
I don't know if the pointing on the video worked, but I did. I kind of pointed at you guys, but who knows? That's why you go follow Joe at Joe Holka and check out his Instagram and the YouTube to watch the video that goes along with this. But if you're just listening in general, welcome, Foot Clan. Welcome to the Footballer DFS Podcast. DFS for the rest of us. And if you're not part of the DFS package, where Chris and myself and many others write articles to help you every single week, and if you're paying attention to us for at least the past 3 weeks, if you're doing what Chris and I have been doing, and Joe, you've been looking good because the past 3 weeks have been smashing, at least for us so far. So hopefully you're with us. And we've seen a lot of you guys tweeting us and say, we love to see when you tweet us at Chris Meaney for Chris, at All In Kid for myself, to see the winnings that you have. But again, if you're not part of the package, it's podcast, which is very simple to remember, 10% off. And we're going to get right into it. But real quick, Joe, I know you have a nervous week coming up here.
Yeah, it's championship week on DraftKings. I don't have a seat myself, but I will be in Miami for the DraftKings Live Final with one of my one-on-one clients, which will be great. Going to do a little bit more research, make sure he's all set for that. He's got 2 seats, $2 million up top. Wouldn't be a bad payday for him, so I'll be sweating that along with my own teams. But yeah, we're going to dive a little bit deeper this week. I feel a little bit more prepared even than normal this time of week because a lot on the line, championship week. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Get out of Minnesota for a couple of days. It's snowing pretty hard out there right now. So Miami for me to be taking off tomorrow. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Nice. Miami.
Chris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jelly.
I'm sure you would like to be in Miami right now. How many feet of snow do you have already in Canada?
Actually, it's not too bad. Look out the window right now. It's nice. Blue skies. We had some snow. I was without power a couple weekends ago, which was awful. To try to just refresh all my matchups. Like, need to get into the playoffs, need to win DK, need to win FanDuel. But right now, no snow, so it's all good. But I would like to be Miami with Joe, 100%.
Yeah, and for the record, the best way to get to those finals is not by burning money in qualifiers. It's by being a +1 for someone else that burned a lot of money in qualifiers to get there, because it's pretty tough to get there. Obviously, a great way to lose money, but it will be a fun event. You do it more for the experience, I think, than anything else. A lot of people probably pretty buried at this point if they've been firing at those cues pretty hard.
Yeah, 100%. And some breaking news as we jump into things, which we'll talk about, but Jameis Winston's only throwing a tennis ball today. So we're going to get to him. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. Before we came on, Joe said, I've been the king of naked Jameis, and then last week was Jameis Godwin, and that did even better. Well, that's been great all year, but it might not happen this week now. So let's talk some cash game plays, as we always start with.
Straight cash, homie.
All right, Chris, I'm going to just jump into your mind here real quick. All right? You ready for this? Because I know you. I've known you for too long. And for anybody that's listening to the show can probably guess where I'm going right now. I know 100% your lineups have started with Chris Carson and then from there.
Yeah, you do know me pretty well. It's hard to argue the matchup and for Chris Carson and just all the volume that he's gotten all year long. Third in carries per game. He's had at least 76 yards on the ground in 8 of his last 10 games. So there's a safe floor. We know that Rashad Penny's not around anymore on this team. So I expect him to be pretty chalky. But if you're a cash game player, $7,500 on DK and $7,400 on FanDuel. I guess the question is, do you even bother avoiding him in tournaments? Because he will be chalk, but there is such thing as good chalk, right? We've talked about this before, but smash matchup. Seattle wants to run the football.
Yeah, he's an awesome play. 7,500 for Carson, 74 on FanDuel. Like, awesome team total there, even on the road. But you mentioned the matchup, like 32nd DVOA against the run. Like, Carolina's a team we can definitely attack in that regard. And Chris Carson in these games without Penny this year has been extremely involved in the passing game as well. So I'm totally on board. I've got him projected for about 24 touches right now. So at that price point, I think he's got to be one of the better kind of plays on the slate, just across the board at the top end of running back. I think he's got to be a guy for cash games that you kind of just lock in and move on from there.
Yeah. So, all right, Chris, give me one maybe I'm not thinking of inside of your mind right now.
I like Todd Gurley. I think even in cash, I think you can get by with Todd Gurley. They've really just kind of turned things over to him. And look, he's had basically 4 good games all year, and they've come, 2 of them at least have come in his last couple contests. He's had 42 carries, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns over that span, 5 catches over those 2 games as well, and at least 3 grabs in 3 of his past 4 games. So that's positive. It's kind of close, kind of close to last year's Todd Gurley, and just the fact that he is touching the ball about 20 times and getting that usage out of the backfield. And his price is, I mean, it's kind of depressed a little bit for somebody who's been disappointing all year, right? I mean, $6K for Gurley on DraftKings. So I like.
Yeah, I think he's more favorable on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get maybe get 3 or 4 catches. They just seem to. I don't know if this was Sean McVay's plan all along to just wait to this point.
He was really playing the long con.
Maybe, I don't know. Like, we can't give Todd Gurley a full workload, and all of a sudden, recently over the past couple weeks, it's like, oh yeah, now we're gonna give Todd Gurley a full workload, right? It's super strange. I noticed Cooper Kupp last week only had about 55% of the snaps. They're using 2 tight ends there just to block a little bit more.
That's what's been wrong with Jared Goff too.
No doubt. Like, well, it has been what's wrong with Jared Goff, I think, because there's been no play action, and they haven't been able to use their best weapon in Todd Gurley, who I do think is their best weapon, right? Robert Woods is a great blocker. He's been involved recently as well. Tyler Higbee's done a good job over the past couple weeks catching balls and blocking for Gurley too. So I think at $6K, I could definitely get involved in cash lineups, and I haven't said that all year, I don't think, about Gurley.
A pretty bold strategy by McVay. Just wait until your team's 8-5 with a couple to go, with third in the division, and then just unleash Todd Gurley. But yeah, 6K. I think that one thing that kind of goes understated this time of year is just some of these backs that have been shouldering a pretty heavy load. Like, depending on where their team is at in the playoff race, like we might see some of them scaled back a little bit. In terms of Christian McCaffrey, we kind of saw the direct opposite last week. Like, they were down 2 touchdowns in the late kind of portion of that game, and McCaffrey was still just catching balls. That's basically how he got there, right? Because I think he was stopped at the 1 yard line, didn't end up getting a touchdown, but basically on like one of the last 2 drives, caught like 4 or 5 balls and kind of got at least to his floor. So that was nice to see. But I mean, the game was completely out of hand, and he was still getting touches. So I think we got to think about that. Todd Gurley, though, is someone that hasn't been shouldering the workload, like you said. So maybe at 6K, his price really hasn't kind of met where they want to go with him. He was a guy that was kind of banged up and just didn't look good for most of the beginning part of the season. This Rams and Cowboys game, I think, stands out as one of the ones that could be one of the highest paced of the entire week as well. I've actually got it projected for the most plays of any game, but I'm not sure where the ownership is going to go on this one. But I do have some interest in the Rams, and Todd Gurley is a pretty big part of that. I don't know if I can put him in the same touch category as our boy Lenny, Saquon Barkley, Chris Carson, but I think that, like, for the savings that you get, Todd Gurley is a pretty nice play this week too.
Yeah, so, well, for that point, you guys want to guess what number 1 and number 2 are projected running backs, ownership-wise, to your point, Joe?
Saquon and CMC.
Wrong. On both.
Oh, wow. It's got to be
Chris?
Henry, right? People are just, I mean, Henry is just...
Wrong.
Patrick
also
Laird.
wrong. No,
oh my goodness,
third.
Patrick Laird.
Wrong. Todd Gurley and Chris Carson.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah, people
There you
are
go.
on Chris Carson. Sure, that makes sense.
Number 1 and number 2, but what you just mentioned, Joe, your boy, number 4, Lemmy, not Lenny.
Yeah, I think that we probably could have saved Lenny for maybe like the tournament portion of today, just because I think most people are going to click Chris Carson for 7,500, but basically the same price on both sites. Fournette, like, drastically lower team total. Jacksonville's kind of given up, to be completely honest. It seems like that over the last couple of weeks. The volume should still be there. I do think that the matchup is still, it's a great spot still for Fournette. Oakland 27th against the run, 29th against running backs in the passing game. I mean, I'm still projecting Fournette for some of the most volume on, I mean, he's top 3 in volume on this entire slate. It's just a lot of the kind of things in terms of game environment. Just, it's a tough one to click this week, but I think he's definitely a guy from a tournament perspective. He ends up being drastically lower owned compared to Carson, compared to Saquon. I think that makes some sense, but I don't know if he's like in the optimal this week.
Yeah, there's been some mediocre running backs too, Jake, who have just found the end zone against Oakland recently. Another team who just seems like they've given up. Although I think this is their last game in the black hole. Maybe they'll be fired up. I don't know. But Darwin Thompson, LaShawn McCoy, Joe Mixon, these guys have all found the end zone over the past couple weeks against them.
My buddy has been in town for the past 2 weeks. He's gone now, but he's a Raiders fan. I've actually watched the past 2 weeks. That team's definitely still trying.
Yeah.
The problem is just they don't have the pieces, but they do have that kid that I always keep forgetting his name. The white dude, the defensive lineman. I say white dude because the white dudes usually play linebacker at this point.
Crosby?
What? Yes.
Thank
you. Crosby.
Team.
Yes. He's been beasting. Yes. Of late. And, I look at it, and it's just the fact that they don't have the run defense pieces. I don't think it's so much the team to like, come at you for that. But I want to talk about this game because Josh Jacobs sounds like he's going to return, which, the logical side of things, we can sit here and say there's no way the Raiders are risking bringing back Josh Jacobs, who is their future, if he can't aggravate. So if the doctor said you can't make the injury worse, that seems to be the logical situation here. So with that, and looking at this game and both this is one of those ones where, Joe, you talk about sometimes too, playing the running backs on both sides. Are we looking at Jacobs, or is there too much risk that you're concerned that he can aggravate the injury and exit early? Again, we would assume, and we're not going to talk about that game because it's the night game, but the same thing with James Conner. Like, why would the team risk him if he can make it worse? So how do you feel, Chris, about Josh Jacobs?
Tournament only. I get super scared when it comes to cash. Like if you're playing a $5 head-to-head or a double up, sure, go ahead. But if you're putting some money down in a cash lineup, no chance. Like I'm just not doing it. I see the queue. We've talked about this all the time. You see the queue by the name. You see the reports. There's been conflicting reports. I saw yesterday Gruden said he didn't realize that Josh Jacobs could actually play this weekend. So that makes I don't understand that at all. Maybe he's just saying that. And again, that makes me want to play him a little bit more in tournaments.
He's playing the long con.
There's another one, long con. But I mean, potentially people should probably shy away in tournaments. I'm not saying probably but they probably will, right? I mean, just because you see that queue
right,
and the potential that he could leave the game. I mean, earlier in the year, there was a game against Green Bay, I think, where he just absolutely balled out, and he missed a part of that game. He left and then came back and was still pretty productive on the ground. So I won't do it in cash. I tend to shy away from people who may even if he is active, Jake, maybe he just doesn't get that full workload, which we're used to seeing. So I'll shy away in cash.
Yeah, I've gone short kind of on Josh Jacobs, I feel like, most of the season. And at 7K, based on some of the other values we have and some of the other guys at the top, I don't think he's going to be anywhere near my player pool this week. I think that, the matchup makes a lot of sense, 31st in terms of DVOA against the run for Jacksonville. So I get that side of it. I do think that if Josh Jacobs were to miss, even though it's looking like he won't, DeAndre Washington's definitely back in play. What did you guys end up doing with that situation last week? I actually think that one of the bigger mistakes that I made on DraftKings was not leaving that flex spot open in order to pivot over to DeAndre Washington, and then maybe you move up or scale up a wide receiver at that point, because he ended up being, I mean, realistically, like Powell was just the chalk last week, right, at a pretty similar price point. DeAndre Washington probably wasn't much worse in terms of his raw projection, but he was like 3% owned. Powell was like 60. So I think that, like, in terms of late swap, like, I wish I would have given myself that flexibility, and I think that was a pretty big mistake. But what did you guys do with the whole Oakland situation last week? I think that's still kind of relevant, like, as we kind of move towards playoff weeks when we're going to be talking about late swap a lot more.
Well, you could definitely, I think this week a little bit more sense. Well, so a little bit more sense in that if you need that flexibility, but I think it kind of comes down to, I didn't do it, but I didn't do it because my lineup didn't afford itself to do so. So for that, again, so people say afford, he was cheaper, but looking at DeAndre Washington, the savings I got didn't help for what my lineup construction already was. And I was sitting so pretty from the 1:00 games that I wasn't going to screw around and just leave $1,600 on the table just to move to DeAndre Washington when I forget who was in my flex was so good anyway. So I think it's a great strategy if you're looking for that kind of flexibility, maybe at wide receiver. Like, if it's going to help you get a wide receiver you prefer more, then I would look for that opportunity. But Chris, the same thing. I don't know for you, but it kind of comes down to the rest. Basically, you need one other spot you can pivot out to make that worth it, because you're not just going to go from somebody and just leave $1,600 on the table just to leave $1,600
yeah,
on the table.
For sure. But I think it's a great point Joe brings up. I mean, again, we're looking at a 4:00 game, so an afternoon game, and who knows when that Jacobs news will come down. Maybe we'll get it Friday afternoon that he's definitely going to play, but it was like an hour and a half, I think, before the game. So I did have Powell in a couple flex spots. I had that in the back of my mind that it could happen. Luckily, I jumped off Powell in a couple spots. I still played a lot of Bilal Powell at that price point, and he was pretty disappointing. And Joe, you alluded to it, the chalk was there. Washington, not a lot of people were on Washington. I think the most intriguing part for me, and I expected him to be the goal line back, but when they were down in that football game, it wasn't so much Jalen Richard. it was Washington catching balls out of the backfield, 7 targets, 6 grabs. And I think that's very encouraging. And, if you're playing again this week and you have you're talking about it, Jake, you have the luxury to maybe swap a guy out. I think, have that in the back of your mind that, keep that flex spot open, that it could be a very similar situation again. If you want to get nuts and play him if you play in those large contests where you put in, I don't know, 100 lineups in a tournament, I think, even still with Jacobs potentially active, again, just in the back of my mind, this is the time of the year where you can get nuts, right? You can get nuts. And what Joe's talking about, some teams are out of it. They're not giving guys full workloads. Right. There's lots of value to be had at this point of the season. So I think even Washington could be in play with an active Jacobs.
Well, so if you're looking at this week, a good opportunity might be like, let's say you have Jacobs and Jacobs makes you only be able to afford Mike Williams. And then if it swaps to DeAndre Washington, now you can swap out Mike Williams for Jarvis Landry, something like that. Like these are the kind of things I would think about. So, those are, and we'll talk about some of these wide receivers here in a second, but real quick before we do, I do want to bring up somebody you brought up earlier, Chris, and that was Derrick Henry. I think the health is scaring a lot of people away because obviously his price is finally starting to get up top. He's second most on FanDuel, just for an example. He's not even inside the top 20 to 15-ish, somewhere right around there for projected ownership. The top 15, he's right around there. And I think it's the injury. And I think it's a legitimate concern because if you saw late in that game, I mean, he's still putting up yards, but I don't know if you saw one of that last run where he kind of didn't even take off running and didn't even try to elude anybody. Kind of almost it was not quite as bad as David Johnson a few weeks ago, but he was in open space. He had the linebacker and one of the corners or safeties coming from coverage, and he kind of just trotted. And I think that's the concern people have is like, he's been a beast, and Joe always likes to make him my boy. But I think that's why people are off him, Chris. I think that's the dessert. I would put it this way. If Josh Jacobs practices in full on Friday and they're like, Josh Jacobs was good to go, I feel better about him than I do at Derrick Henry after watching what happened last week.
Yeah. I think it's fair. I saw him on the sidelines too, stretching, but I mean, he can only go downhill from here, right? I mean, he's had at least 25 fantasy points in 5 straight games. He's had 100 yards on the ground in 4 straight.
Was that a play on words?
Yeah, sure. Because it's exactly what he's done all year. So, I mean, he's touched the ball at least 19 times in 4 straight games, even with, being on the sidelines there at points. So, I mean, Houston's given up the 7th most fantasy points to backs. That's the one fear I always have with him is how many balls is he going to catch out of the backfield? It's probably only going to be 1 or 2. That's why it's tough for me to maybe get there on DK. And you mentioned the price on FanDuel. It's gotten up there, but hey, if people are going to be afraid, I'm seeing this low ownership. I mean, I'm not going to avoid him 100% in tournaments. Maybe we shy away in cash because of that, but again, he's just been so consistent.
Price is so bad. Like I don't know. Like I think that if we can we separate ourselves from the results for 3 seconds over the last couple of weeks? Like I get that Henry's been playing really well, but like this is the type of guy that when he gets to this price point, like you shouldn't be anywhere near him. You should be playing Derrick Henry if you like a guy like that in a larger field tournament when he was like 6,900, 7,100, because then if he does go nuts for his 2 touchdowns and 150 on the ground, then you get leverage there. But now it just feels like for him to really get there at that price point, I mean, at that point, like, I don't know. I'm not going there. I'm taking a flyer on one of these other guys in the mid 7K range 150 times out of 100, basically.
Is one of them the one that's $800 cheaper on DraftKings?
I mean, I have 4 guys I probably would prefer over Derrick Henry.
You have his jersey behind you. I'll give you that's the second hint. I mean,
we haven't talked about Saquon enough. He's a phenomenal play this week.
Is he? So, I mean, let me ask you this, Joe. Is he, period? Is he, with the fact that, just so people out there didn't see the news, they're potentially down another offensive lineman? And does your opinion change if it's Daniel Jones versus Eli Manning at quarterback?
It does a little bit. And for the record, I am not a talent evaluator whatsoever. So yeah, people are saying that like Saquon doesn't look the same. His burst isn't the same. Like I have no idea. All I can tell you guys is just looking at his projection in terms of the touches, his matchup. It's all very, very strong. And then what we've seen in the past with Eli Manning, like he's someone that is not scared to really dump the ball off, which we've seen. So yeah, I do think it matters a little bit. He's a lot less mobile. If they are going to see a little bit of pressure, that would make sense. But Miami isn't a team that pressures a ton anyway. Realistically, like I haven't projected for the second most touches on the slate. He's 7,700. I'm playing him over Derrick Henry in every single lineup, in every single scenario.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I agree. I mean, Henry, he has to do exactly what he's been doing, and again, it's tough to really imagine that he's going to be able to do that again, right? Houston's game plan is going to be to try to take him away. But for me, for Barkley, I like him again, just tournaments. I just don't play him in cash. I haven't played him in cash since, I think, week 3 when he suffered the ankle injury. I just haven't been buying into the fact that he's been healthy. But I agree with everything that Joe said. I mean, I expect him to be top 3, top 5 in terms of touches. The matchup is unbelievable. We know the upside is there. Catching a few balls out of the backfield. He's done that a little bit more recently, 6 grabs, 11 targets over his last 2 games. And he looked okay last week with Eli Manning under center, even against a tough defense in Philadelphia, 17 for 66. I mean, that's one of his better rushing, games of the season, to be honest, in terms of just yards per attempt. So yeah, I don't mind it, but I can't trust the Giants, Jake. I can't trust the Giants. Can't trust Barkley in cash. I just can't do it.
All right. Anybody else before we move to wide receiver? Good. Thumbs up.
Well, what do you guys think about Patrick Laird? Honestly, let's look at it objectively. He's 4,500 on DraftKings, like against the Giants, like a team that we know pass catching running backs have done pretty well against. Like, are you guys? I mean, I have him for almost 20 touches right now and 4 catches at 4,500. I think he's cash value.
I would agree. I think so too, actually, just because of that price and the fact that he probably will catch 4 or 5 balls. I mean, if he gets you 13, 15 fantasy points at $4,500, I think that's great.
Yeah, excuse me. He's got double-digit points in the last 2 games, 5 targets, 4 receptions in both. He did have the touchdown against the Eagles, as you know, but 15 rushes last week. That's a surprising thing. Understand the 15 rushes. Well. Yeah, 15 rushes only turned into 48 yards, but it is the Giants' run defense, which is, better than their pass defense. But if their pass defense is worse and he can do damage in the pass, point being, almost 20 touches. For Patrick Laird
there for a guy that's 4,500.
Yeah, we don't know the status of
55 on FanDuel too.
Yeah, he's cheap on FanDuel.
And we don't know the status of Devontae Parker. Like if Parker doesn't play, I mean, maybe there's a couple more grabs for him.
Actually, Alan Hearns missed practice yesterday too.
Just totally opens things up. Like maybe the answer though with all these guys hurt in Miami is just to avoid the situation completely. I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, I think that the volume should be there for Laird at that price. I think he's going to be super popular.
He will be too.
All right. So he is the number 3. He dropped. I just checked yesterday because I was writing a column for the footballers. Patrick Laird was initially number 1. He's fallen behind, not by much, but he's behind Todd Gurley and Chris Carson. I don't know what happened in the past day that, Carson Gurley got some talk going on that jumped ahead of him, but top 3 right there. So wide receivers, cash game wise, go to you, Joe. We went to Chris first on running back because I predicted him. So.
Yeah, I think wide receiver is an interesting one this week. Like, I think that there's going to be a ton of salary available because there's a lot of kind of decent values this week. Like, depending on what happens in Jacksonville, I think that's something that could shape this entire slate is if we get Chark. I don't think he practiced yesterday. We'll have to see if he
didn't practice already today. The report was, hold on, let me go back to it real quick, isn't expected to practice again today. So it would seem he's out. But so I'm glad you brought up Jacksonville because I was going to bring them up as a whole.
It's the entire thing at wide receivers if we can play these cheaper guys if Chark is out. I don't know. I think that's where the value looks like so far.
But who would you turn to? Because I don't think so this is something that Chris knows because I brought up on the Athletic, the Throwback podcast. I said, we haven't really had a Dede, Conley, Keelan Cole trio that's been out there for most of the season together, let alone a trio that's been out there with Minshew together to really say we know who the guy's going to be. Like, we know one of them should hit, but where are you going if you're trying to pick one? Are you a Dede, Conley? I'm assuming it's one of them and not Cole, but which one would you go to?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that we're going to have to ask. For me, like in these situations, I guess would prefer the guy that I think has more upside that's cheaper. So Conley over Dede for me right now, 3,600 on DraftKings. Like these are the type of guys that I would prefer to play. So like Dede's probably fine, 4,600. Like he's probably safer play if you're looking at it from like a cash game perspective. Like he's got at least 7 targets in 3 straight games, not a ton of yardage or anything like that. Conley is more of the air yards guy, right? So I think that he's probably the one that benefits a little bit more from Chark being out. So Conley at the cheaper price, more upside. I think that pretty clearly.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was going to say too. I mean, Conley seems like the deep threat guy, the air yards guy, the tournament guy, and then I think Dede's just slightly safer because, you alluded to the targets, but he's at least, catching balls. There's been some disappointing games from Conley over the past few few contests, like 3 or 4 grabs here and there, but DD seems a little bit safer at this point. And I think everyone should probably get involved in this game. I mean, it's the highest total on the board, 49.5. I mean, the other one, Dallas and LA, is 49. So I think that both of these contests probably be, high pace, lots of scoring, and especially on this Jacksonville and Oakland side. I mean, these two defenses are just awful. They are.
They certainly are. So
I just been playing the same guys in cash, and I've had success. So I'm just going to keep throwing them out. Robert Woods and Julian Edelman. Like, Robert Woods has 47 targets and 33 catches, almost 500 yards in his last 4 games. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he just gets all of the volume. Brandon Cooks is not an option at all for Jared Goff in this offense. And then Edelman, the same thing. I mean, it's been 8 straight games where he's had at least double-digit fantasy points. He's had 10 targets in every one of those games. I know he's not this sexy GPP going to get you 30 to 45 points. He's not that guy, but it just, with New England, and there's so many question marks with this offense, the one constant is Julian Edelman. So I know people are probably annoyed for me to come on here and mention Edelman again, but he's 78 yards, like in every single game at least. So
yeah, I'm annoyed.
Plug him in. Move on. You say you're sick of it?
Robert?
No, I was joking about it. Yeah, just kind of the annoyed factor. I'm kind of curious. So neither of you have mentioned yet. Joe, you go back to you. Mostly on FanDuel, but their prices. I'm still surprised at their prices on both sides. But go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I more or less was like 36 targets for Robert Woods in the last 3 weeks. Is that good? I don't know. Seems okay. I think
seems decent.
Yeah, I mentioned how much I like that game. I'm trying to figure out ways to back into it a little bit. Like, yeah, Robert Woods finally scores. Like, that's where all that kind of touchdown progression we've been projecting for him the entire season based on the volume. It was like at a historic pace for someone that hasn't scored. So yeah, maybe we even have more coming. I think that Robert Woods is a great play still on DraftKings, on FanDuel as well. I think both. I mean, that's a game that I'm trying to figure out the best way to get access to. And Gurley scares me a little bit more than I think he scares you guys, it sounds like. So yeah, I'm in on that. What do you guys think about DeAndre Hopkins if Will Fuller's out again? Is he still someone that's in play? He's really expensive on FanDuel, 8,600 on FanDuel. He was kind of the late week chalk last week. So are you guys going there? He's 8K on DraftKings. I think that it's a week where I think we're going to have some salary to spend up a little bit for at least one of these guys.
I do like him. I like him even if Will Fuller is out there. And you know my feelings about Will Fuller, which probably just means if Will Fuller's out there, he's going to score 4 touchdowns. But I think that Hopkins, just even at that price, I think that's why the price makes him attractive, but it makes him attractive for tournaments for me because the cash, it feels safe, but I don't feel like you need to go there in cash. But the ownership, to your point, we're looking at the last couple games, 20 points, almost 14, 20 something points in those last 3 games. When was the last? I'm looking right now. The dude has at least 7 targets in every single game, and that's actually his low because every other game outside of that game against the Chargers way back in September, he has 8 or more in double digits in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games, double-digit targets. Will Fuller or not, I love him, but more so for tournaments just because I don't feel like you have to. To your point, there's a lot of these options like Woods, like these names that you still haven't brought up yet. I'm seeing if one of you can get. You have 3 shots here. You're swinging and missing, guys. Like Chris, or where are you on Hopkins? And throw out another name and see if you can get one of these 3.
I love him. I think, with Michael Thomas off the slate, Mike Evans not around, Darius Slay going to be on Chris Godwin. I love Hopkins. I think I agree with you, Jake. I don't think he's a must. I don't think you have to get up there in cash because there's so much of value on the board this week, but I'm going to have a lot of exposure to Hopkins. You mentioned the targets. How about 5 catches in every single game? And he's just trending up lately, at least 80 yards in 5 of his past 7 games. Finally starting to get some touchdowns. Mentioned the high total here in this matchup. So I think he's clearly the best wide receiver on this slate. And yeah, I'm all in. As for the other guy,
all right. Throw out a name.
Kenny Golladay. I do it in cash, but
no, I do like Kenny Golladay. All right, so 2 of them are in this. Actually, all 3 of them on DraftKings are in. Let me double check. Yeah, all 3 of them are in the 6,000 range. They're all in the low 7 or upper 6,000 on FanDuel. I'll just give you all 3: Jarvis Landry, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. I feel like all 3 of them are mispriced.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. Keenan Allen. I mean, that's the one that I guess is eyebrow raising for me. I've kind of been Xing him out a little bit. Those games.
Who, Keenan Allen?
Yeah, just in general. I guess I don't.
I didn't hear who you said. That's the one. That's
Keenan Allen. Sorry.
His price dropped on DraftKings.
Yeah.
I don't know. On a week where we have so much salary, I think I would prefer just to go up a tier, and that's really the thing that kind of stood out to me in that group. But what did you have for this part of it, Chris? I know you had some.
Yeah, I agree with the 2 of the 3, and I was right there with you at Keenan Allen. I mean, I think Keenan Allen's fine in tournaments, and yeah, his price did drop. But DJ Moore is somebody we've talked about a lot, and he had his worst game in probably 6 weeks, and he still finished with 81 yards and double-digit fantasy points. So I definitely don't mind him. He's in the DFS pass, and Landry as well. I mean, Landry's much like Edelman and DJ Moore. These are the same guys I think we've talked about a lot all year, and just cash game guys that are just completely safe. They're going to get double-digit targets. You wonder where the upside really is, with DJ Moore and Carolina just looking so brutal lately. But I like them both, Jake. Yeah, Keenan Allen a little hesitant in cash, but I think the volume is still going to be there for. Yeah, just
that's
just
the one you're
cash,
hesitant on. Of the 3,
definitely. All 3 of those. I can't imagine Keenan Allen has a high projected ownership. Does he? Oh.
No,
that's what
I'm shocked at it too. People realize that the Vikings secondary has been one of the worst secondaries in all of football this year. They do know that, right?
I think it's just Phillip Rivers.
Is it
Phillip
perception?
Rivers. That's what it is.
And Phillip Rivers has all of a sudden been balling out if people haven't been paying attention to that as well. So I think that's the question I want to ask you, and both of you guys. I think this is, I'm going to present it not necessarily in a question, but I think this is where the opportunity, we talked about it early in the year because it was stuff carried over from 2018. But at this point of the season, I think it's also similar to what we were bringing up earlier this year was about Matthew Stafford. And nobody wanted Matthew Stafford. And Matthew Stafford was playing great. People still didn't want to roster him. And we're talking seasonal too, Joe. So, but at this point, I think the perception about the Vikings is still it's a good defense, and it's not. And I think that it's one of the opportunities for you to take advantage, especially in DFS, is perception versus truth.
It's fair. I still think that, like, if we're just looking at the game environment, this game it looked pretty terrible. And I mean, you say what you want about the Minnesota defense, like they're still the 6th best team at defending the short area of the field, which is kind of where Keenan Allen is going to be operating. So, I mean, 6,300. For me to consider him in this spot where I don't expect there to be a ton of plays on either side, not a great team total. Yeah, I mean, at least he's at home, and like you said, Rivers has quietly looked a little bit better over the last couple of weeks. I could maybe get there in tournaments, but like with DJ Moore, I mean, he's basically the same price as DJ Moore, and I can't get him.
Maybe it's going to be a Mike Williams game. He finally had a touchdown last week.
He finally got back. I'm surprised. I thought Mike Williams would jump up because of that, but not so much. I think
maybe people, you're right, to your point, Jake, maybe people are still afraid of, like DraftKings. People. Maybe they're afraid of the matchup, but I mean, looking at the Vikings overall, I mean, 7th most points allowed to wide receivers, and there's been some pretty big performances from some guys over the past few weeks.
All right. So, anybody else a wide receiver before we move on here?
There's a few that I have interest in. I don't know if you guys agree in cash, but Galladay.
I mean, you brought up Galladay
cash, but I like the matchup. No Marvin Jones. He's been, 2 touchdowns in 2 games with David Blau, but Terry McLaurin is interesting to me at $5,300 against the Eagles secondary, and then I'll save the rest because there's a lot of dart throws that we can go in for tournaments. So. Yeah,
no AJ Brown.
That's one for tournaments, I think. I mean, would you play him in cash? He's very boomer bust.
The price is still just so depressed.
It's very appealing. Good matchup.
It's still tempting. I mean, if you three out of the last 5 games have been great, but I said this on the throwback, Chris. If you believe in fake up and down plays like the Giants winning the World Series, it's been up, down, up, down, up, down. So actually, this ridiculous, nonsensical trend means you should have a down game, Joe.
You think so? Like these are the guys that like historically kind of bury me a little bit. Like I thought AJ Brown was a fantastic pivot last week if you had some struggling teams from the morning games, just because of like it's such a high efficiency spot. Like the volume, like on paper, like doesn't look as great. In terms of his like target market share and his air yard market share, that's still fine, but you got to kind of take into consideration how low volume this passing attack has been. Like what have you guys been doing with Ryan Tannehill? Because like these weeks where I'm just like a little bit scared to go there because he's throwing the ball 25 or so times. I mean, he just keeps burying me with his efficiency at this point, and he's having a little absolute bonkers season right now. So like I've played him a good amount, but last couple of weeks I've been scared off and gotten buried.
So I don't know about you, Chris, but I think that's why you keep crediting me with the Jameis Winston thing. I will say this: I haven't been on Tannehill. I've written him up a couple times, but Chris, I haven't had the stones to like put him in, because I feel like as soon as I do, it's going to be the week that he falls off. It's almost like owning Frank Gore in fantasy over the past couple of years. Like, this is going to be the season he falls off. It's like every week I feel like as soon as I buy into Tannehill, it's going to be the week that he falls off.
I mean, and you look at the price and you see the rankings across the board in the industry, and he's ranked, as a top 5 quarterback. You're having debates with people like, should I play him over Russell Wilson in a semifinal matchup in season-long leagues? So I get the fear, but yeah, he's been in the DFS Pass as a tournament play only for a few weeks now. We mentioned it last week. He's second in completion rate, just behind Drew Brees. He's first in yards per attempt. The offenses look good. They're playing at a faster pace, no huddle offense. Houston's given up some big plays, so there's a lot to like. And on top of that, at least 37 yards on the ground in 3 of his past 5 games. That's a nice bonus. He's had a couple rushing touchdowns, 3 over that span as well. So, I mean,
right.
I have no problem with it. And you can kind of just do it the same way as Jameis. And you mentioned it, Jake, right? I mean, naked Jameis has worked out. You could do naked.
Oh, no, I would 100% pair him with
you could do naked Ryan Tannehill. That game against KC, there wasn't a wide receiver. When he had a really solid game against the Chiefs, I forget, I'm just looking at the game log in terms of points, there wasn't a wide receiver on that team who had more than 1 catch. And he ended up having...
No, see, but
that
that's
is
my
the
concern.
But, if he's spreading it around and Henry is moving the ball...
Well, what do you have on... Are you looking on DraftKings?
At the game log? Yeah, he had like 20 DK points in that game against KC.
Okay, because he had 18.9 on FanDuel. Yeah. That's what. So to what I was saying, and this is where I was going with the whole AJ Brown thing, is joking about the up and down of the games. So he's been right there with Ryan Tannehill, 25, 18, 32, 14, 28. That's AJ Brown, up, down, the same games, because he's going to AJ Brown. So where I'll agree with Joe, and I agree with you up until this week, Chris, I don't want him in tournaments because he's the highest projected owned quarterback. And my problem... Right. And my problem is, so he has the 39 attempts against Carolina, 19, 18, 22, 27. Like, if you told me he's guaranteed to throw the ball at least 30 times, you could probably get me on board. But to play him in tournament as the highest projected owned quarterback for the efficiency level Joe was talking about, for the attempts being low, I just can't do it.
One thing, there's one more thing too that I had to touch on just looking at this as you guys were talking. Like AJ Brown, like we talk about yards per route run a decent amount, and
what is this, like 17?
It's insane. So like just for like the people listening, like a very good yards per route run, like Julio Jones 2.3, DeAndre Hopkins 2.3, like Jarvis Landry, who's having a great season, he's 2.5. This is over the last 4 games. We have guys like Robert Woods at 3.5, which is pretty crazy, but then AJ Brown's all the way up at 4.8 yards per route run, like destroying everyone over the last 4 games in that category. So yeah, the volume hasn't been great, but he's hitting basically every efficiency metric and just like literally breaking my entire model.
What's the ownership on him, Jake? AJ Brown.
On who? I'll tell you 1 second. I moved over to quarterbacks because we had that perfect segue into quarterback, and now you're making me. You're making me backtrack.
I would imagine it's pretty high.
Let's see. It is. It's inside the top 10. He's 8th. He's 8th. So there you go. So to your point for the, hold on, I wanted to. You made me think of something, Joe, when you said that for the yards per route run last week. There it is. Last week, 6.1. And the only reason
I'm changing my lineup right now.
I was pulling that up because Darius Slayton had 5.3, and I was just thinking about because one of the other things that Chris knows that we brought up on the podcast as well is I was saying, this, I talked about it last week. I was a little bit concerned with Eli Manning at quarterback because the deep ball went away. Like that, he never really had a great deep ball to begin with. But if you talk about the 8 targets versus the 7 targets, the chasm, and I'm talking chasm, that was between here. I'll just tell you last week for specifically. So the yards per route run for Darius Slayton was 5.3. Do you guys want to guess what it was for Shepard?
5.
You're not far off. 0.9. Right. But in any case, that's why you made me think to go look it up. So last week, by the way, is Zacchaeus was number 1 at 8.45. 1 reception for 93 yards will help that. Treadwell, 2 catches, 7 yards. But then AJ Brown is number 1 essentially for anybody that had any significant usage at 6.1. Darius Slayton 5.3. And I'm only mentioning this out because number 3, and we haven't talked about this team, this game. I know we're going to talk about the running backs in tournament, hint, hint, because I feel like that's where we're going to go with this. But Emmanuel Sanders, 4.24 last week.
Monster game.
Man. Sorry, I was so distracted by the lineup. You guys might as well not build a lineup this week. I literally just built the nuts on FanDuel. So
okay, well, just send it to us.
I'll read mine and we'll call it a show.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So what about Emmanuel Sanders? By the way, Keenan Allen right behind him at 3.9.
Boy,
just so you know,
your boy
Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen. It's going to be a Corey
Chris.
Davis.
I think Sanders is tough just because of the volume of that offense to the passing game, right? Like I maybe I haven't considered like those guys enough this year, but he's like way down on my board right now. Like
no, I don't. Really just, I mean, that was his first big game in a long time. I know he's been dinged up, but that game script I think was just perfect for him and for Debo and for everyone in that San Fran offense. I just don't feel like that game's gonna this week is gonna play out like that. I don't expect Atlanta to do a whole lot, and this could be a game where they just use all the running backs. So I'm kind of off of Sanders and Cash, but I get it. I guess tournaments.
You guess.
Well,
I get it.
mean,
I guess. Whatever.
When he's been healthy,
Sure.
there has been a couple solid games. I think his second game with the 49ers, he definitely seems like potentially Jimmy Garoppolo's favorite target, even with Kittle there. But yeah, I just can't get there in Cash.
All right, well then how about one more for you guys before we go back to quarterback, since we're kind of bouncing around the quarterback, but to come back to it. Joe, if no Sherman, which it sounds like, but also no Kwan Williams, any Julio? I mean, he should essentially see the ball 7,000 times this week.
Yeah, I don't care about the Sherman thing at all, but I think Julio's a fine play. As maybe like a one-off. I don't think I'm ready to play him with Matt Ryan or anything like that. I mean, it's a lot of red across the board, but how many times have we seen Julio? Like, these are the spots where Julio goes crazy, right? Because no one's on him. And, like, the target share should be there. I mean, all he's missing is a bum ankle to really have, like, that 200-yard game that he has here and there every other season, it feels like. So, yeah, at $7K, like, it's a price point that we probably should take some notice based on his ceiling and probably where his ownership's going to be in the spot. I don't know if I'll be there for it, but if you're playing 20 max, if you're playing some of this larger field stuff, I think he makes a decent kind of lower owned.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. He's
as
cheap as he's ever been. He hasn't scored a touchdown in 9 games. People are starting to complain about Julio again. So this would be the time to roll him out in a tournament when he's cheap and he's on nobody's radar.
By the way, to your point, Joe, this is going to be fun to see what our lineups are because I kind of love mine, although I might have to pivot at quarterback.
Told you, man, don't bother building it. It's
so let's talk quarterback. Let's get back to it. I have to pivot off of it. You guys, Joe, we've said it like 3 times this show already. I love my naked Jameis. I love last week with Godwin. I initially had my first 2 were Winston, Godwin. Start the lineup and then go from there. But I mentioned it, and Chris, you're just like, oh, yes, that's the reaction I had. And I saw the video. It's the 3 quarterbacks dropping back. You see 2 footballs go across the field, and in the middle is Jameis Winston with a tennis ball going across the field. I got to tell you, we still have Friday to find out, but let me phrase it this way because people are going to be listening to this Friday morning. Still going to have to wait on reports, and then the reports are going to come out afterwards, obviously. So, Chris, what do you need to see from Jameis to feel good about him in cash? Because we know Jameis, who cares about the turnovers? Jameis is fine in cash, in tournaments, and everything because he's terrific in fantasy. But with this kind of injury, if he's having trouble gripping the football, what do you have to see on Friday for you to say, okay,
throw
I feel
football.
better? I
need to see him throw a football. Yeah,
that's it.
Like
That's as easy as just throw the football.
Whatever he's throwing. I know it's probably a little easier to avoid interceptions throwing tennis balls in practice, but I need to see him throw a football. Like he needs to throw a football. But yeah, to your point, with all the picks, I mean, he's second in yards, he's second in touchdowns.
Will you pull off of Chris Godwin if it's Ryan Griffin?
Yeah, probably. I'm not super interested in Godwin. I'm kind of interested in other options on that offense. Yeah.
Is this your Juju Smith-Schuster
Yeah,
concern?
honestly, a little concern there with Darius Slay. He's shadowed before in the slot. I think that's a possibility. So, I mean, do we talk about? I mean, I know we're on quarterbacks, but there's a couple other wideouts in Tampa that I like. But yeah, I'm a little hesitant with Jameis at 6'9" with that news that you're saying, Jake. So I don't know if I will go there in cash. But I mean, I've been playing like you, man. I've been playing Jameis all year in tournaments, and I'll have at least one lineup with Jameis in tournaments as long as he's active.
I think it's fair. Like I guess maybe it's as simple as what you just said. If he can throw a football, like does he make a good fantasy play at that point? Like I guess bring it to the absolute stone basics there. Yeah, I mean I think Jameis is great. I'm kind of with Chris that when there's so much uncertainty there, I think that the cheaper options make more sense to me. But if people just decide to not play Godwin, maybe that makes some sense. We'll kind of talk about OJ Howard, I'm sure, at some point as well with Evans out. Maybe he sees a spike in volume. You never know. But the Winston thing, I mean, I'm not really there. He's 8,200 on FanDuel, 6,900 on DraftKings. I don't know. I think there's better spots this week, but you'll get an ownership discount just because people are, I guess, scared that he can't throw a football. Is that a bad thing? He can't throw a football, so maybe, I don't know. Not for me though.
What if it improves his accuracy? Oh, this is not going to happen because this is decision making. It's not even his accuracy. He just doesn't decide to throw it well. So, all right. By the way, to your point, Jameis Winston is 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. There you go. Down by Jared Goff against Dallas. So if we're not doing Tannehill because, we know Tannehill and cash and tournaments are different. So where are you looking in cash? If you're not looking there, Joe, are you going Watson Hopkins stack? Is that where you're looking?
I mean, I like that stack quite a bit, but if we're just looking to pay down a little bit more, I need to work through this with you guys, I think. So Kyler Murray is 5,600 against Cleveland. I have some concerns with Arizona that I haven't had the entire season. Like, they've been kind of slowing down their pace a little bit. So last week, 29.6 snaps per second. That was the 23rd best in the entire league last week. And, I mean, they were behind the entire game against Pittsburgh. You would have thought that was a spot maybe where they would have tried to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. So they haven't been really going no huddle near as much lately as well. So like we think of Arizona as like this team that like there should be a ton of plays, but I actually don't have this game projected for near as much as I expected to. Like, I love Kyler Murray. He's 5,600. He's super cheap. It's against Cleveland. He's going to have a decent rushing floor for us. And like the short area of the field in theory is kind of where you attack Cleveland anyway. So like I like Kyler a lot. Do you guys have any pace concerns in this game?
I have actually just slightly collar concerns. That's just at this point of the season. Whether or not, in seasonal, it's seasonal. I'm not worried too much about seasonal. But you're looking at, what was the last game? Yeah, I just pulled it up. 2 rushing yards. Yeah, sure, it was Pittsburgh, but 28. He found the end zone against the Rams, but I just don't know that he's still 100%. And if the 100%'s in his legs, that's the biggest concern I have about it, Kyler Murray at this point.
Yeah, I have some concerns too. Mentioned it last week as well. He really has to get you for 30 to 40 yards, I think, to kind of return value, even at $5,600. I mean, he hasn't. I know he is so cheap. I think in tournaments, I think it's fine. Maybe you want to do a Murray and Christian Kirk, who they've both been pretty quiet over the past few weeks. I mean, you look at Kyler in the game log and you see fewer than 200 passing yards in 3 straight contests. So I think that will shy people away a little bit. But I think if I'm looking for somebody cheap in around that range, and again, maybe this is just a tournament play only, and I don't know Chark, but Minshew, again, $5,500. I know he was awful last week too, but I just like that matchup a little bit more. I think there'll be more points scored. I'm just completely out on this Arizona offense. Maybe it has something to do with just how they've changed the pace of play, Joe.
You almost said something that terrified me, like, because you're looking around kind of the industry and projections, early week projections. Like, is Eli Manning a thing at 5,200? I still prefer Kyler strongly, but I don't know. He's 6,800 on FanDuel.
He's a thing.
No,
I think he's a thing. That's why I want to ask you guys.
No.
So you prefer Kyler over Eli? At least I found
no.
one
I'll
guy
tell you who. If
more.
I'm going down that low, I don't care about last week's game. I'm going to Gardner Minshew. Screw the Eli nonsense, because you know what happened with Eli? Yeah, the first half of that game, everybody's like, "Oh my God, Eli's great! Look how good!" What happened in the second half of that game, Chris? You watched it. He went back to being sucky, crappy Eli. He did nothing in the second half, and it was the crappy Eagles who basically let Slayton just go downfield, like, oh God, maybe we should cover somebody. They got lost in their own mess. Grant, we've talked about this before, Chris. Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby have helped this defense. It's still exploitable. They still have miscommunication issues. They still have talent issues. And Eli Manning looked like garbage in the second half of that game.
He's playing against Miami, though.
I don't care. I would actually tell you Miami might be a tougher matchup at this point.
I mean, I'm not playing Eli Manning. Like, what do you? So, like, this is what I was kind of piecing together in my head. He's 5,200 on DraftKings. What's his ownership in the live final against Miami? 5,200 with Saquon is going to be chalk.
Gardner Minshew.
I mean, I mostly agree with you. I think Eli. I'd be shocked
Chris,
if Eli's. I think he's going to be like 8% in the live final.
No, he's the 6th highest projected on quarterback.
Who is? Eli?
Yes.
I thought you were arguing that he was a thing. He's definitely a thing.
That's what I'm saying. He's a thing, and that's another reason why so he's 6th. He's got 5% ownership. It's quarterback. You always talk about that, Joe, how flat it is. Right behind him are Winston, Goff, Trubes.
I
don't know why I just called him Trubes.
Yes, nice.
Trubes, let's go.
Coming off the best game of his career. I love that nickname for him, Trubes.
Trubes, Baker Mayfield, and Kyler Murray round out like the top 12-ish. And then Phillip Rivers, by the way.
If I didn't have like the best FanDuel lineup of the entire season right now, I'd be.
Oh
I'd be
man,
playing
hopefully you
Truth.
have Eli in there. I think he's
troops.
a thing too. We had this debate on the throwback with Jake, and I think Brad Ziegler liked him a little bit more. But yeah, the second half was pitiful. It was absolutely disgusting. I don't know offhand how many yards he got, but I don't think it was more than like 25 in the second half. But it is Miami, and it's at home. If that matters, I guess it'd probably actually be a little bit better.
Well,
if it
Daniel
was in
Jones is
Miami.
practicing today.
Yeah, Daniel Jones is practicing, but I from my reports that I saw, I think it would. I thought that Trimmer said it would be a shock if he played, but who knows? Keep an eye on it. But I mean, Slayton to Manning.
Ooh,
Or Manning
we do
to
have
Slayton?
breaking
Oh,
news,
let's
by the
hear it.
way. Speaking of practicing, so Devontae Parker in the concussion protocol sounds doubtful. Here's the one. Guess who returned to practice today?
I don't know. Juju
I see
Smith
quizzical
returned.
faces on you guys. T.Y. Hilton.
T.Y. No,
Not on the main slate, right?
Monday Night Football.
No, I'm just throwing that out there for, well, like we want to, just throw it out
Yeah.
there for
Good to know.
other people playing those. Would you? Here's the only question I have for you, Joe. T.Y. Hilton, if he plays in the captain spot.
God, I don't think
That
so.
response was gold. But I mean, look at that game. I mean, it's Darius Slayton, or actually, I forget who said it. Kudos to who was it? I got to try and remember. But he said Darius Slayton breaker, and I thought that was
Nice.
actually pretty good last week.
I like Slayton.
T.Y. Hilton could break the
I like
slate.
Slayton, and I think Slayton to Eli is an interesting combo. But I mean, top 5
God.
ownership on Eli Manning. That's a big yikes. That's a big red flag for me. I don't want to play
Yeah.
chalky Eli.
That is a big yikes. All right, so anybody else at quarterback before we get tight ends, defenses, and tournaments, because we're like a little time crunch here.
What are you guys doing at the top end of quarterback then?
Deshaun Watson.
We basically
Same,
just talked
same.
about.
I'm going to the other side.
Deshaun
If
Watson.
everyone's going to be all over
Okay.
Tannehill, I'm going to the other side with Watson. I think Watson and
Bingo, and that's even more reason why
he's
I'm
starting to
with you, Chris.
just be. He's starting to
I like it.
him and Watson seem to be, or him and Hopkins rather, just seem to be really just dialed in over the past couple weeks. So I like both of them.
I can't believe that Garoppolo is the highest on FanDuel.
Oh, I know.
That's just so funny. That's just not the ownership, Joe, the price. Just in case. I wasn't sure
think
which
he's a
your face
complete-
was for. I wasn't sure if your face was for the ownership or for the price. But either way, here's the thing. Look, let's jump into tournaments. We'll come back for because tight ends and defenses, we always keep saying every single week. We usually talk about the same guys. So let's jump into tournaments because I want to talk about this game, talk about running backs. Chris is we've talked about this at length, so I'll let you go first, Joe. Not on this show, but this is the Raheem Mostert. Oh my God, Shanahan at the worst time in the world could just screw us all over in seasonal. This is DFS though. The Mostert play, the price, the usage, the opportunity in this game, it's all there, but it's still Shanahan. What do you do? Are you touching Mostert?
No, I have zero interest whatsoever.
Do you have
in
zero
Mostert.
interest in
Why
this
is
entire
that?
offense?
No, I would just play Patrick Laird for 700 cheaper, 100 times out of 100.
What about no
I
wide
don't know.
receivers,
Like,
no
I
George
guess
Kittle, no nothing?
Walk me through the monster play. Like, I guess I am projected for 2 catches right now, on like 17
And I think
touches.
that would be.
I don't know. These are the guys I don't play. So you talk me through it. Why is he a play?
Go ahead.
Because let's see. I'll tell you because 21 touches 2 weeks ago against Baltimore for 22 points. And then, yes, only 13 touches last week, but also 24 points. It's the fact that what is the appeal for, and maybe this is a better question for you, Chris, is because Joe, you generally fade these people in general. You never wanted Tevin Coleman. You don't want Derrick Henry because if the game's great, you want the guys with the 20 touches. I know that. And
It's just volatility. I don't think we have to chase at this. He's 7,500 on FanDuel. He's not in play on FanDuel.
I agree. And I feel like 17
see,
touches
if-
is. I know he had what you just said, at least 20 against Baltimore a couple weeks ago.
21
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. So what I'm saying, Chris, is
He
if
just
you're
had
going
10
to,
and
his
two
projected
targets,
ownership
like,
is somewhat high. It's 12th, but it's not top 5. It's not top 10. I'm just saying, if you get one of those 2 games as the 12th highest owned running back, basically, if he just does what he's done for the past 2 weeks, you're going to have somebody you need to have in your lineup.
If anyone plans on playing Mostert this week, please send me a head-to-head for any amount. I would love it.
Yeah, I
Wait, on FanDuel or both sites?
Either.
I mean, he's only 52 on DraftKings.
Still, send me a head-to-head for any amount
don't
on DraftKings or FanDuel. My username is Changs vs Huskies on both. I will be waiting.
Don't play Mostert in head-to-heads or cash. Yeah, and when you said 17 projections, I feel like that's kind of high. Yeah, yeah.
It might even be, yeah. So maybe I'm high on this projection.
I don't even know.
Like
even with that game against Baltimore, Jake, I mean, that was a sloppy game. It was rainy, and that was kind of his coming out party. He looked really good, and that was when Tevin Coleman kind of disappeared. But I mean, I do feel like this will be all the running backs. I just think Tevin Coleman may get involved too if this game does get out of hand. Maybe they scale back Mostert and Brutus slightly, and Coleman has a few catches against his former squad. But I think that I do feel like it will be a running back game. I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo, in terms of his price on FanDuel, is an absolute fade. So if I had to choose somebody in this offense, it may be him. But I mean, I think 17 touches is pretty high. And the one catch that he had was a trick play. It's a pass from Sanders. You can't bank on that every week.
Like we would prefer Gurley for 800 more, right? On DraftKings, just so we're clear.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. No, just that is such that was almost like a subtweet of a question. Just so we're clear, correct? You stupid idiots.
Well, I don't know. I'm so confused right now. I think my favorite part of last week's show, because I had to go back and edit it because there was multiple things that we had to edit out of last week's show. Spoiler. I had to go back and I heard Chris be like, "Oh God, I'm just so confused." I literally died laughing in my office by myself. I'm not kidding. I might have to put that on Twitter just so people
just
can hear one
open
more
the show with that. All right, so let's talk. We cover the 49ers, and that's what I really wanted to get to because people have that question covering that team in general. A nice matchup. So you got our advice on that. So tournament wise, where are you looking, Joe? At running back. Anybody different than we talked about?
Yeah, no, I think Fournette, just because the price point is the same exact thing as Chris Carson, I prefer Chris Carson. But I mean, the volume, the only thing that you can kind of poke holes in is just how bad Jacksonville is. This game environment's not great overall. But I think Fournette's okay in tournaments in comparison to Carson. What do you guys think about? I want to get your guys' take on Zeke because I love this. I love this game, this Dallas and Rams game. I think I've said that 500 times today. Is Zeke just out of play at this point? I know the Rams are very strong against the run, but from a tournament perspective, these are things that we would look at, or at least what I would look at for a tournament.
In my lineup, 22 points last week. The volume, and a good opportunity here is just 18, 14, 17, 22. He's got the floor with the ceiling. I know that generally in floor, you're talking cash, but he's in my lineup.
Yeah. I'm going to have some exposure to him too. He's looked great. I don't see people complain about Zeke this year, but he's hit the 20-point mark in 3 of his last 4 games. He's been fine.
Yeah.
He had 2 games ago, he had 10
You know who he is, Chris?
You
know who he is?
No.
He's Michael Thomas from 2 years ago in fantasy. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe Michael Thomas isn't putting up 30 points a game. Oh, he's just putting up 16 plus every single week. Oh, it's so awful that he's not Christian McCaffrey. I'm sorry.
Settle down. Zeke's fine. The one thing that he hasn't had as much volume this year as in years past. Last year he had so much volume, but I don't know, Dak's spreading around a little bit, but I like Zeke. I have no problem with him. 10 targets 2 weeks ago.
Any other running backs you're looking at? Dalvin Cook? Dalvin Cook's ownership has plummeted as his production over the past couple of weeks because the touches haven't been there.
Yeah, we talked about this before we went live. I think I don't know. Maybe I'll just let other people win money with Dalvin Cook. So this is the week to play him because I'm probably not going to have him. I think that for whatever reason, every time I play Dalvin Cook, it's 5 different guys in that backfield. We got CJ Ham touches. We got Amir Abdullah touches. We got Irv Smith dump offs. It's just so frustrating at that price point. I think he's kind of priced out for me. I prefer all these guys in the 7K range that we've mentioned. Yeah, I'm not really.
Yeah, I would agree with you too. I'm not really on Dalvin either. I have a fear too. If this game does potentially get out of hand, if we do see the old Rivers where he just really struggles. They're looking ahead to Green Bay next week. Maybe we'll see a whole lot of Madison or anybody else in that backfield. So a little hesitant, despite the fact that he has had a rushing touchdown in 4 straight games, but he hasn't been as efficient on the ground. And I don't know how fully he's healthy. So kind of avoid him.
I can confirm you need
Absolutely.
More than just a rushing touchdown for Dalvin at that price point. I can confirm with personal experience.
There's a backfield we haven't talked about at all, and that's in Cleveland, Arizona. It's just been such a smash spot for a lot of these teams. I know Chubb and Hunt keep showing up, but I don't know how you guys feel about either of those guys. Even with Chubb hanging around in the backfield, or with Hunt hanging around in the backfield, Chubb still had at least 16 touches in every game, 92 yards on the ground in 4 of his past 5 catches over the last 3 games. I know his usage in the backfield hasn't been, it wasn't like it was in the first few weeks when Hunt wasn't active. So I don't know how you feel. It's just a complete fade because it is a good spot.
No, Joe, for everybody out there watching video, you'll see it happen, but I got it. Barkley was chewing on wood. So talk about this. And then the other name I was going to bring up before we get to wide receiver is talk about Aaron Jones too. I'll be right back.
Okay. I would assume the people that want to play Raheem Mostert, they're also the people that want to play Nick Chubb. So again, like send me those head to heads. I'll be more than happy to play you. I don't know. I think Chubb, he's a little bit too expensive still. Like it's the same thing for that. I just think now that Hunt is there, he's taking away enough to where I think he's just too expensive.
And for Zeke, $100
in terms of Aaron Jones,
Joe is like,
yeah, that's true. It's very true, and it is Arizona too. So I mean, I think maybe I don't know. It's really interesting the way that the pricing has gone with those guys. I thought that Chubb would be cheaper at this point of the season, but he's really not. I think that the thing with Aaron Jones, this is like the guy that I really struggle with because I love it. Like I said earlier in the show, I'm not a talent evaluator, but I do like Aaron Jones like as a talent. If he was like a bell cow back, he'd be like right in line with all these other guys, or maybe even better than some of these other guys we've talked about. So I think from that perspective, yeah, like maybe you can get on board with Aaron Jones in tournaments, just because I think he's always tournament only, right, based on like the volume that he's seeing. So I think it's a decent spot for him. The other guy that I wanted your take on, Chris, what do you think about Miles Sanders? He's 5,900. So like if I was trying to find a pivot for someone, like if we're trying to find a pivot off of Patrick Laird for a little bit more expensive, is he at least in play for you, or what? Do you think
I think
about
Sanders. I think he should be in play. You know, Boston Scott came in there and had a couple goal line touches, and actually was kind of the spark plug of that offense in the second half. But it was mostly because Sanders, he left. I think he was getting evaluated for concussion, so he was in the tent for a little bit, and that's kind of where Scott took off. But even still, like Sanders has, the opportunities have been there with Jordan Howard, not around. It doesn't look like Howard is going to be playing this week either. So, 3 straight games, at least 5 targets. That's encouraging. 9 catches over the last 2 weeks. He has had a lot of red zone targets. Most of those targets that he's had have been in the red zone over the past couple of weeks. So, I like the spot. There's just really nobody. This Eagles offense is Nelson Aguilar. Doesn't look like he's going to play. We know Alshon's not hanging around. Josh McCown was ready to play wide receiver last week. So they need some guys who can catch some balls, and Sanders is one of them.
No, yes. I thought it was dehydration and cramps for Sanders.
Actually, you're right. It was.
That's good.
Yeah. But by the way,
price,
Aaron Jones. That's my big complaint about him forever. If you just would, oh God, Packers, just give him a workhorse role, and we'd all love some Aaron Jones. All right, 2 things. One is I forgot to do this since we were talking tournaments.
You down with GPP?
You have been for a few minutes, and we're continuing that. So let's talk some wide receivers that we maybe haven't brought up yet that you're looking at tournament-wise. Tyreek Hill, anybody?
What do you guys think about Tyreek? I think he's interesting because I'm sure we'll talk about Mahomes when it comes to tournaments as well. Like it seems
we
like
can couple them together. Yeah,
we could. It seems like, and maybe this is just something that I'm making up in my head, but like Tyreek's big games, it seems like it's spread out a little more on like some of the other weapons, because like we have Watkins for extremely cheap, and like all these different, like KC is one of the hardest, I feel like, offenses to figure out, and obviously Mahomes isn't having near the year he had last year, but like you never get a price discount on Tyreek, so it scares me a little bit. I don't know, he seems like a guy that just like seems drastically overpriced, but I think that there'll be not much ownership there, so I could be on board. It's just tough.
The lowest I've ever seen his ownership before.
Okay,
we're talking behind. We're talking behind Marvin Jones, who people apparently still haven't realized is out for the season.
Okay. I would suggest playing Tyreek Hill over Marvin Jones 100%. It's interesting to hear that ownership, and you see the price, and you see the fact that Mahomes only has 3 passing touchdowns in his last 3 games. I mean, that's pretty strange, and it's not
crazy.
Like he's. I mean, sure, New England, going into New England is a tough environment, but he played Oakland the week before that, and he only had 175 yards passing. Played the Chargers the week before that, he only had 182 yards passing, and then you get that big game, boom, Titans 446 and 3 scores. So maybe it's coming, quote unquote. Jake, he's due. But I mean, that's the time to get in on these guys, right? In tournaments, I think it makes some sense. But to be honest, I mean, Hill wasn't on my radar. I think I maybe like him a little bit more, talk myself into it.
And the projected ownership, since we're talking about it, when we talk quarterbacks with wide receivers, because it only makes sense to, is Patrick Mahomes is outside the top 25 behind Kirk Cousins and Matt Ryan and Drew Lock.
24 other quarterbacks that I would want to play.
You could if you really tried, but his projected ownership right now is 1%, equal to Kyle Allen.
We probably should have some exposure to KC.
It's probably. I mean, it's playing tournaments. When have you ever seen the ability to get Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill at sub 25 at each of their positions? 1%, basically 1% and 2%. I mean, that's if it hits, you're rolling in the dough.
What are we bringing it back with? Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant. Noah Fant's banged up, right?
Noah Fant.
And by the way, can I take my Noah Fant victory lap for the season?
Are you allowed to after 14 weeks though?
I think did you watch this guy? Like he's finally getting more opportunity. Like it's the end of the season for a rookie tight end that's really talented.
I'm just shocked that he's possibly playing after getting carted off in that game. It's just this. What, he pulled the Paul Pierce on us? Oh no, I was just kidding. I'm fine.
His skill set. He's a beast.
He's got that Q next to his name as well.
That always helps. Any other tournament wide receivers? So I'll throw out a couple that we haven't named. We haven't named Diggs or Thielen. We haven't named who else? We didn't name Cooper Kupp despite liking that game. And then he's supposedly 100% again. Tyler Lockett with a Russell Wilson there, Joe.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's another one like the Patrick Mahomes where nobody's got ownership on it.
Lockett.
It's fair. Like things have to go so perfectly, I feel like, for the Russell Wilson stack to go nuts. And like it'll happen, but I also think you'll go broke chasing it. But yeah, I mean, maybe this is a spot where everyone is going to be on Carson. Maybe it makes sense to throw some Wilson stacks out there. I'd be in on that. I think the Diggs one is interesting actually, and I don't play Diggs very often, but in tournaments he seems like someone that could be kind of a nice buy low opportunity. He's really interesting.
Yeah, actually. I like Diggs a little bit more with Thielen looking like he's going to play in the game. I'm kind of interested in these Tampa guys. Like, I mean, Justin Watson 3,700, Rashad Perriman 4,500.
No, so that's where I'm going because everybody's on Justin Watson and Perriman being on the field as much as he was. I think
at least there's a track record with him,
right? Like if you told me pure talent versus talent, to what Joe says before, like he doesn't watch that much. I'm not saying, oh, look at me, I do. I'm just saying, like if you're asking me the talent question for something that I do on my side of things. This is why we defer to each other that have our skills in other areas. Like I definitely defer to Joe every single time when it comes to lineups and opportunities and rosters and certain. I ask you don't send me enough of these little secret contests that you find. I need more of these. Sunday morning, be like, just send me a text and like you're so good at finding those. But in any case, Justin Watson over Brashard Perriman as a talent. But the use in the snaps, Chris, and the fact that I think everybody's jumping on this Justin Watson talent bandwagon and ignoring Brashard Perriman, I think that's the pivot.
Yeah,
play.
I think so too. And it's easier to do it on DK where Perriman's only 45 and Watson 37, but on FanDuel there's a pretty big gap. I mean, 64 for Brashard Perriman is like, oof, it's kind of getting in that range where maybe you pivot away from him. But Watson, I mean, or $4,500 on FanDuel, it actually doesn't get any cheaper than that. So I think depending on what set you play, I have no problem rolling out Watson on FanDuel, but a little hesitant on DK.
Yeah, I guess the extensive film work that I do on wide receivers is basically going to playerprofiler.com and typing in names. And his comparable is Jordan Matthews, but 91st percentile Spark athlete. So, yeah, I can get behind that, but I agree with you that like the opportunity definitely skews towards Perriman. It seems like he's going to be the lower owned guy in that category as well. So yeah, I'd be in on that. I guess shout out friend of the footballers, Matt Harmon. That's where I get all my wide receiver film takes from. So either Player Profiler or Matt Harmon.
You meant me that you do the show with? I mean, you could just.
Are you a film guy?
I'm a 50-50. You can't do one without the other.
Okay, fair enough. I'm still going to skew towards Matt Harmon.
I had 101 draft prospects in my you could pull that up and then go look at that. I mean, I'm a friend of the show.
You like Justin Watson then as a talent though? I'm being serious. I'm actually curious.
Yeah, no, I do. Like I said, if you told me talent versus talent, but I'm going to also take the opportunity. This is why you got to do both. I'm going to take the opportunity. And knowing that Brashard Perriman was out there as much as he is and should be out there as much as he is again, and the fact that if Scotty Miller is back, I don't know that Justin Watson is on the field as a number 2 or a number 3. They're just going to be back and forth with him. That's all that's being said. But what about last one before we get to the tight ends and defenses to wrap up the show? Amari Cooper. Banged up, but we like this game. But obviously the concerns are Rams. I mean, there's a lot here, but does that make him an intriguing tournament play, or would you just go to Michael Gallup?
6,500 for him, I guess. Like, he's not really going to hit any of these things that we normally talk about at wide receiver just because he's been banged up. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's like tournament only, large field only type of thing. What's his ownership looking like right now? Because I would assume that game's going to be relatively popular. Right?
It should be popular.
It's relative popular, but he's behind Michael Gallup.
Okay.
Do you care at all about Jalen Ramsey?
Price there
Do you care about Ramsey at all?
Yeah, I do. I still do.
So I kind of like Gallup. I mean, it's a little bit cheaper. I want to throw out another scrub. I mean, why not? For Miami, Isaiah Ford.
I mean, well, if Allen Hurns and Devontae Parker are both out, but here's my problem. You know what I go to, Chris. Is he going to handle the attention? I mean, like, Janoris Jenkins is not Janoris Jenkins anymore. And actually, he's banged up. He might even not play. And the secondary options for the Giants are not good. But if you're going to be asking Isaiah Ford to be the number one, I mean, this might just be, don't even waste your time.
Fair. But this is the time of the year, again, you just get completely nuts. There's so much value.
Right.
I have no problem taking a shot on Isaiah Ford coming off a 9-target, 92-yard game at $3,700 in a pretty good spot. So
I mean, yeah, Greg Ward was an AAF player, so it's not.
Yeah, I to your point, I would like to see Parker or Hurns on the field for Ford.
You guys are too sharp, man. So, like, I started looking into Isaiah Ford again, typing his name into the Google machine, and his best comparable, Tyler Boyd, someone else who probably doesn't do very well on his own, needs like that alpha on the other side. So interesting with Isaiah Ford for sure. I guess one guy we haven't talked about that I still think is in play, like, are we completely avoiding OBJ because of all this other stuff that's like kind of circling around the OBJ narrative? He's 6,400 against Arizona. I mean, he's still top 10 in weighted opportunity. The short area of the field, I mean, they're the worst team in the league.
They are,
that.
But
like I haven't.
That's why I love Landry. I mean, bum, groin, any.
Sure, but everyone's going to play Landry, so is OBJ.
Well, that's why I brought up Landry earlier. His projected ownership still isn't high enough. He's not even inside the top 10. I'm going to just keep going Landry until it does. And my biggest issue is like Patrick Peterson. Okay. Still, he's going to be on OBJ, and OBJ at less than 100% versus Patrick Peterson. Bleh.
Fair.
Same for you, Chris.
OBJ, man. I want to play him, but he just doesn't look healthy. Watching him, you could see after a couple of the routes that he runs, I don't know if it's all show with OBJ. I really don't know, but he's like limping back to the huddle. Now what is he going to see Patrick Peterson? I mean, I don't know, but I think again, this is the time to do it. If you're going to do it, you see the groin, you hear all the noise, you see Landry. If you look at the game log between Landry and Beckham, it's been all Landry. And I mean, the matchup is even still with Peterson. It's not bad against Arizona. So if now's the time, I mean, I think maybe now is the time to just have at least one line. It's kind of like the Julio thing. You know, the upside is there. He just hasn't done anything over the past few weeks. So I mean, I don't hate the call.
All right, so let's move. I got 5 minutes. That's for everybody out there. We're time crunch here. Tight ends and defenses. Let's hit tight ends first, and this is both tournament and regular. Let's just cover them all. Where are you looking for yourself, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, he might end up being a little bit popular, but I think if we get some more value, that just going up to someone like Darren Waller is someone that I'd be interested in. Second most routes at the position over the last 4 games. This Jacksonville matchup is pretty strong. And I always think these guys are going to be higher owned than they end up being, just because in roster construction, it's a position where we are trying to pay down. So if we get someone else for a cheap value play, like if Olsen doesn't play again and everyone just goes back to the Ian Thomas train, I actually really like Darren Waller at 5,500, especially if like we end up playing some of these cheap Jacksonville wide receivers. You end up with like a little bit of a mini stack there that still makes some sense to me. Yeah,
I like the Waller call. Obviously Ertz. I mean,
obviously,
I don't think we're not breaking any news here. And again, there's just, I mean, he was running wide receiver routes last week. There's just not a lot of guys there. And he's been pretty good over the past few weeks, right? And he's caught 9 of the 13 balls. That was last week, but found the end zone a couple times. 11 targets in 4 of his past 5 games. So like Ertz, and just looking a little bit cheaper. I mean, since we mentioned all the Tampa guys, I wonder OJ Howard. I don't know if we go there and cast.
I knew you were going to bring up OJ this week.
I mean, why not? You brought him up on Monday as well as just a guy that, I mean, Bruce Arians is probably, his hands are forced, right, to play OJ Howard whether he wants to or not. I mean, this guy just may get some targets.
Which is crazy. That, like, how crazy is the fact that compared to the beginning of the season, where people, including myself, had him like 5th at tight end, to the fact that his hand is forced when it comes to OJ Howard.
It's disgusting.
It is. By the way,
In that
Zach
kind of-
Ertz and OJ Howard are 2 and 3 in projected ownership. You haven't mentioned the one name. Tyler Higbee is number 1.
That's the guy I was just going to bring up, like in that same exact range. He's 3,900 on DraftKings. Like, since he's kind of taken over as that like main pass catcher outside of Robert Woods, I guess he's played over 90% of the snaps. He's seen 19 targets. So I think that that's someone that we could go to. And when we kind of have seen Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks kind of take a step back, a significant step back, like they've been running more of these tight end sets with Higbee. So I think that he's still, I mean, with that really high total, like again, a game where I think there's going to be a lot of plays, like 3,900 is a fantastic price for Higbee.
Yeah, I have a free square for you guys. If Greg Olsen doesn't come back, Ian Thomas, put him in.
Yeah.
Done. Move on.
Definitely.
Yeah, he's very solid again.
I think he returned to practice, but yeah, keep an eye on him. I agree. I think
He did
he's
a
must.
walkthrough yesterday with Greg Olsen.
Okay. He's dealing with a concussion.
Yeah.
right?
So I'll have to watch. Greg Olsen and obviously changes that. And Greg Olsen hasn't even been that great this year when he's had like 2 really good games. One more for you guys. You know where I'm going. I'm going right back to the guy I used last week. And I was nervous until late in the game. And that late in the game touchdown took me from a couple like mid-level, I'm doing good okay, to yeah, nice cash day for Jonnu Smith. Going right back to Jonnu Smith again.
Yeah, I like that too. I feel like there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game. So don't mind that call.
Let's play AJ Brown.
Just play. I'm playing both. Possibly. We'll
There you
see. Possibly.
And you're not going to play
Hey,
Tannehill.
Look, I know Jonnu Smith's not getting the heavy targets, but this is exactly what I wrote up, and everybody can go see in Roto Pass for the discount, 10% off. You can go check it out, or actually podcast for the Roto Pass. Sorry, is 4 targets, 4 receptions, and your boy Noah Fant destroyed them 4 for what was it, $1 billion and a touchdown, and then the other game was 4 for 75 and a touchdown from people they're facing. There, it's huge opportunity on low projected total or like low projected volume even. So I love the opportunity there. So defense is where you guys looking.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just try to find a cheap play, and I'm not really feeling any of the cheap ones. I thought maybe Detroit halfway through the show when you started talking about Jameis throwing tennis balls, potentially, but I think honestly, I mean, there's just not a lot. Well, like Eagles stand out against Haskins. They've been dialing up some pressure, get after the quarterback. This again isn't breaking news, but I think there's some value on FanDuel with the 49ers. Like they're up at the top on DK, but they're $500 cheaper than the Pats and $400 cheaper than the Eagles up on FanDuel. So I think if you can find a way to get the 49ers dial up some pressure against Matt Ryan, the line is not great there. I think that's an okay call.
Lions are number 1 projected ownership, by the way.
My goodness.
People want to play defense against a guy that can't throw a football, but
or possibly Ryan Griffin, not the tight end.
40 attempts. Yeah, there you go. No, I think that Detroit's pretty solid relative to like some of these other teams in terms of their pressure rate. Get a bunch of awesome data from Sports Info Solutions in terms of that stuff, and they're still top 5 on the slate in pressure rate over their last 4. So I actually kind of like Detroit at 23. I agree with Chris that one of the raw points plays that I think a lot of people will be on, but for good reason, is Philadelphia. Just following Dwayne Haskins around every week, you'd probably be making a lot of money in terms of your defense selection. So yeah, they're expensive, but we've seen this year a lot of people just like, of course, like it's pretty plus EV to pay down a defense, but you can get some, like last week, Pittsburgh was like very low owned across the industry, and they were in a fantastic spot last week against Arizona. So like because they were expensive. So sometimes paying up to be contrarian is something that we probably don't talk enough about when it comes to defense. So I think Philadelphia for me at the top end pretty clearly.
All right, well, I'll save mine for our lineups. So because neither of you mentioned the 2 teams I'm looking at. So let's do our lineups and get out of here. We ran long and I'm so behind.
DFS Battle Royale.
All right, well, Joe, you told us you had the lineup that we don't even need to think on our own.
Yeah, man, if you're behind, I'll take care of it for us.
All right, go ahead.
So I am going to go with Ryan Tannehill, the AJ Brown. Going to bring it back with DeAndre Hopkins. Very expensive on FanDuel, but I do think he's worth it, especially if Fuller is out. So that'll be my main stack. And then something that, again, I've been mentioning, I feel like every week, is trying to bake in these little mini stacks as well. So I mentioned Darren Waller before, him and Chris Conley together. But as kind of round out my running backs now, Saquon Barkley, I think that this might be the game. This might be the game that he finally does it. 8,300 for him. I'm still on board with that volume for sure. Chris Carson, And then Patrick Laird, 5,500. I like him more on DraftKings, but he opens up a ton on FanDuel as well. And then we talked about him at the defense position, paying up a little bit to be contrarian. I'm going with Philly D at 4,900. That's the lineup. Close out the show now.
Yeah. See you later. Good luck, guys, this weekend.
No, you don't want to give yours, Chris?
Do I need to? Yeah, I'm just kidding. I have Watson up at the top, and I'm pairing him up with Hopkins. I'm going there. I like the fact of coming back with AJ Brown there. Chris Carson, Todd Gurley at running back position, D.D. Westbrook in at wide receiver, Zach Ertz at tight end. I am playing Justin Watson. I'm playing him in the flex at $4,500, and then I basically have I can go with any defense that I want there. I got San Fran plugged in right now, but I could go up to Philly and find a way to get New England, but I'm going to roll at the 49ers.
All right, well, you guys got a mix of mine, although there are two that you haven't mentioned. So mine is Deshaun Watson, Chris Carson, Ezekiel Elliott, told you I had him, AJ Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, attacking that game, Keenan Allen, told you I was going to use him, Jonnu Smith, staying in that game, Patrick Laird at the flex, and then one of the defenses you guys didn't mention, I know he looked good last week, but I'm going to still take the opportunity to attack Drew Lock in Kansas City and force that pace with the Chiefs. And if I don't get the Chiefs on DraftKings, as I liked as a cheap play, is thinking, hey, you could always get bad Kirk Cousins if he's forced to throw a lot against the Chargers defense that has been playing really good against the pass of late. So Chargers were one of the other ones that I would pay down for. But all that being said, like I said, it's a long show. Hopefully you stuck with us because this is what helps you win is all this information, all this knowledge. Follow Joe Holka at Joe Holka. Chris Meaney is at Chris Meaney. I'm at All In Kid. You guys know that. DFS Pass. Put in the podcast 10% off. Check out Joe on the Instagram too. That's where he posts all these videos, the links to the YouTube. Make sure you get those winnings and celebrate with us. Let us know when you do win on Twitter. We love you guys. We'll see you week 16 next week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.